Experiences of secondary education as a visually impaired young person.
Hi, I'm Emma, I'm 22 and I'm a Look mentor.
Hi, I'm Abby, I'm a Look mentor and I'm 23.
Hi, I'm Natasha, I'm a Look mentor and I am 21.
Hi, I'm Beth, I'm 20 and I'm a Look mentor.
Hi, I'm Kate, I'm a Look mentor and I'm 22.
And I'm Christina and no one's ever going to know my age. I'm hosting this. We are going to talk today about experiences of secondary education as a visually impaired young person. What was, in general terms, in a couple of sentences, was your experience of secondary school?
I found that compared to primary school, at secondary school, there's a lot more variation in terms of being with different members of staff in different spaces, learning from different mediums, and it really changed from day to day, from sort of lesson to lesson, how I experienced it as a VI person.
What were the highs and lows of that? Were there positives and negatives, or was it more negative, or was it in between?
So I used an iPad at secondary school, and I found that when teachers were using a PowerPoint, that was really easy for me to access. They could just send it to me and I could look at it. The lessons I struggled in more was especially maths, which is my favourite subject and is what I study now at university. But it was a real struggle at secondary school because of teachers writing on the whiteboard on the wall where I just couldn't read it, and different teachers having different levels of understanding and willingness to adapt things for me.
I think overall secondary school was, generally quite good, but I did feel very different all the time, and I definitely felt like I always wanted to be able to fly under the radar like other students, but it's everyone at school knew me, all of the teachers, which is useful because without that knowledge and communication, they can't help you. But I also just felt like I was always noticed and I didn't enjoy feeling different. And there was also always felt like a lot of responsibility on me to be able to communicate to everyone else what I needed. And I remember that felt quite difficult at the time.
So advocacy was a big thing.
Yeah.
So for me, I was quite surprised when I started secondary school. Simple things like changing classroom was quite scary to me because suddenly you had to navigate a huge school with different classrooms and different teachers. And similarly to what Natasha was saying about meeting all of those different teachers and telling them what your needs are was very different to my primary school experience of having one teacher who knew me, who was much easier to talk with and understood my needs. I had some good friends at secondary school. I also had periods of times where I struggled with that, and similarly with support with my eyes. There were some good times and sometimes it was really hard, so it was quite a mixed journey, my experience.
Yeah, I'd probably say the same. So I had quite a mixed experience at school, with socially and with kind of the help I had. I had some great times, and I think they came when I really accepted kind of that I had a visual impairment. So kind of being a lot more vocal about it allowed people to understand it more, and the taboo around it kind of went away. So as I got older, I felt a lot more comfortable speaking about it, being very upfront about it. But also I kind of felt like I had to be sometimes because of my albinism. It's quite a forefront condition, so it's in your face. I kind of learnt to explain that, but I found that actually helped me a lot, being really, really open. I had some bad times though too, a lack of access sometimes. I felt like, I think all of us can agree sometimes that the repetitive asking made you feel a bit like a burden. I'd say a very mixed bag at school.
I would say my experience of high school was a bit, positives and negatives, like a roller coaster. Throughout high school, my vision was getting worse because of the nature of my condition. So trying to fit in was difficult when I had to use a cane more, and then I got a guide dog in high school. So it was that balance of trying to fit in, but also nobody truly fits in at high school. Having a good support, a teaching assistant, helped massively. He was quite understanding of what I needed. But again, the repetitive nature of having to ask and ask and ask for what you need, which should be just a given, can be frustrating. And obviously the social side of being a teenager is hard enough, and then being a VI teenager is just a bit mental.
If you can remember, when you were in year 6 and you were at that point of going into secondary school,
I felt quite lucky. I had my older sister who went to school the same high school that I went to, so I knew that she would be there if I needed anything, but also I was very aware that she was in year 11. So I kind of had that year of support, but also I felt massively sick. In primary school, it's just this small little bubble and you can kind of navigate that, but then you go into a high school which is 10 times as big, and it's just daunting and nerve-wracking, and yeah, it's a very overwhelming experience, I'd say.
I remember being relieved that because of my vision impairment, I knew that my school had already been sorted out a year ahead of most of my peers. So I'd had a chance to visit my secondary school, which was good, and met some of the support staff there. So I remember all the other students in my class being very worried about finding out which secondary school they were going to, and at least I didn't have to worry about that because I already knew. But I also remember being very upset that my secondary school was different to everybody else's. A lot of people were going to schools that were within their local catchment area, and the school we'd selected was one that we hoped would be able to support my visual impairment best, but that meant it wasn't as local. So I was the only person from my primary school who would have been going. I think I was excited to start secondary school because I went to a very small primary school, and although it was lovely, I think I was ready to move on to bigger things. But I was definitely worried about the fact that all my friends were going to stay connected and together, and I was going somewhere without any of them.
So I remember that summer before I went into high school, it kind of dawned on me that I was going to have to get the bus by myself, because my primary school was very close to me, but also I was going to have to, I think someone touched on this earlier, but walking between classrooms, like in primary school, I don't know about everyone else, but my classroom was always the same. So then when I went to secondary school, it was like such a massive crowd of people, a lot of older kids as well. So it's like you bump into them and you'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry. And none of them would understand, but it's just the way school goes. So I was actually so anxious about kind of approaching a new environment. Those are people I didn't know. And my secondary school was massive. I think there was about 240 per year. And we had 2 sites as well. So I had to walk between 2 sites at lunchtime, break time and stuff like that. And yeah, I just felt like such big anxiety doing that. And I remember my first day of year 7 walking in, and I was lucky to have had friends from primary school who came along with me. But I think sometimes we forget, despite the fact that our visual impairment might make it so much bigger, like that anxiety is so much bigger. I think everyone's anxious to go into secondary school, so you've just got that on top of it, really. But yeah, I'd say I was very, very nervous to enter a massive, massive school.
I think for me, my experiences may be a bit different, or maybe I'm just not really remembering it that well. But I do remember being nervous, but as you said, like everyone feels nervous. It's not necessarily the VI, it's just being a kid, like that's just life. And I did go to a completely different secondary school, like it wasn't related to my primary, but I did have a few friends with me from primary school. And I think the reason why I wasn't really that scared was because all of the things that I found hard in secondary school, I was already kind of dealing with that in primary school. Like, I already very much was like having to speak to the teachers at a really young age. Like, I felt different to everyone. Like, there was still other people. It's not like I knew everyone in the school, so there was still like unfamiliar faces. So I don't know, I feel like the things that I found hard from a VI perspective were almost the same in primary and secondary school.
I think I had quite an easy transition in that I'd started using an iPad towards the end of year 6, and I'd also started to gain some independence in terms of a teacher had shown me how to use the printer outside so I could do some things for myself, and I'd got used to talking to teachers about what I needed. But also I was very lucky in that my best friend from primary school was the only other person who went to my secondary school with me, and they spoke to the primary school, and we ended up being in the same class, which they wouldn't usually do for kids from the same primary school, and we sat next to each other in all our lessons. So to begin with, I was really, really lucky to have her with me all the time and to help me if I needed it, and also to get the train with me, because we'd never done that on our own before, and to walk with me, and we walked together to secondary school for the whole 7 years we were there. So I was really lucky to have her, and I think I knew that going in that it was going to be okay because I was going to have her with me.
So did I remember when I transitioned to secondary school, I went to the school and with my QTVI and we kind of walked around it, so I knew where things were. What did you guys, like, kind of in terms of like mobility, finding your way around the school, classrooms, getting to school? How did you find that? Because that's something that is unique to VI people. Most kids that transition to secondary school, it's a massive deal for everyone. But when you're VI, you do have unique things that other people, like they can just read the door numbers and they can just look across the playground and know where they're going, but we can't do that. How was that for you guys?
Everyone else seemed to get lost as well, to be honest. I think that almost made me feel less bad because I thought that I was like getting lost and not finding places because of my VI.
Something I'd say about like the transition, obviously you do it with like HAB specialists and stuff, but it's one thing when you're walking around a high school when it's empty, but when there's 1,500 people walking around and they're all in like shoving you into walls as a tiny year 7, like nothing really prepares you for that. And I get that like every year 7 is small and getting pushed around, but I think it was a very overstimulating kind of environment. People having like black belt blazers on and stuff. It felt like the corridors just got really dark. And even as a cane user, and then when I had a guide dog, like people just don't see that. But yeah, I would say that like a lot of high school buildings, like all the corridors kind of look the same as well. So I really struggled with finding my way around sometimes. I had to go off different like sensory cues, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I found there that's where being open was actually quite helpful. So I kind of adapted this technique, and it's something I've actually carried through every new kind of stage of my life. But it's like telling people quite early on, and it can be quite scary. So don't get me wrong, I didn't always do it. I really picked and chose my moments and like, you know, vibes of people and stuff. But I would sometimes actually just be quite open and be like, look, I can't see. So can I stick with you at break? We had 2 sites and it was about a 10-minute walk between the 2. So I'd actually ask like my peers to just be like, can I stick with you? So, and it's a great way to make friends as well. It's a great way to get chatting, and then they forget about the eyesight. And then I'm like, oh, I didn't even have to think about that I'm in the top room in like some really random place of the school because I followed you there.
It was similar to me what's being said about finding those people who can help you and making friends through that as well, because early on many people don't know each other, so it's a good way to get to know each other. I literally worked out who was in the same tutor group with me and who was going to be going to the same lessons as me on what day, and put myself next to them and made sure that I was with them when we were changing classes initially, which helped with my eyes but also helped a lot with making friends, because as Emma was saying, you do naturally form friendships over time as well. And one thing that I found really helpful was knowing how to get to the disability support. I knew that if I got lost or I didn't know where my next class was, in a worst case scenario, I could just go up there and tell them I was lost and see if they could help.
I think a skill that I've kind of developed from my VI, and I think a lot of VI people are really good at this, is learning routes really easily and sort of remembering things. Like I've got quite a good memory for like lists of things. So I found that actually I knew where we were going before a lot of my classmates had learnt it. Like I remembered where we had to go because I couldn't look out for the door numbers. I had to remember where we go. Like I had to know, I'd be confident I was going in the right direction. So I think people actually started to stick with me a little bit in terms of for leading the way. Definitely not to start off with, like for finding them in the first place, I was no good. But once we've been there like once or twice, I had it down a bit more before other people did.
And what about friendships?
I would say the main challenge for me in terms of friendships definitely came from me and not from other people. I think I was very lucky in that the people I met were all very, very nice. But it was always, the problems always arose from me not wanting to talk about being VI or not explaining it or not reminding people. And I think something I've learned now, which obviously I'm much older, I've been out of school for a few years, is that I can just keep reminding people.
Why do you think you didn't want to?
I think probably a little bit in secondary school it was that, it's going to get annoying if I keep telling people they're not going to want to hang out with me if all I'm doing is something. So one example that I was telling one of my friends about recently is that I developed a skill for if someone showed me something on their phone be able to react to it without seeing what it was. Kate's laughing because I think she probably knows how to do this. If someone shows you something, being able to tell if it said you should laugh at it, or you should go, oh, or you should, how you should react based on what they're saying, rather than actually be able to read what's there. Because I never wanted to, because no one wants to sort of, naturally I would just take their phone and look at it, but people don't want to do that necessarily. It's a bit strange. So I think, but that's a me thing rather than other people. Like, it's natural that people forget. The one thing that I think helped me tell people was, rather than just sort of bring it up when teachers would like hand me a printout, or people would see me using an iPad in class, they could ask me about it, and then I have like sort of a springboard to explain it, rather than just bring it up out of the, because it's a weird thing when you meet someone to kind of go, oh, and by the way, I'm vision impaired, especially when we're all like, a lot of 11-year-olds don't really understand what that means. And a challenge for me in year 7 was, in February half term of year 7, I started wearing glasses, and I didn't wear them before, and they're nothing to do with my eye condition. I'm short-sighted as well as having an eye condition, and so everyone suddenly thought, oh, amazing, she's got glasses, she'll be fine now. So then I kind of had to start over a little bit.
I think for me, I actually gave like a presentation to my year group, not like on the first day or anything, but like within the first term, maybe second term or something. And it just allowed me to like tell everyone, because then they wouldn't be making assumptions. They would have the knowledge. Because I think a lot of the time I was like really worried about being judged, but actually most of the time, especially when you're young, people just don't understand. So they will try to understand, but if you haven't given them the knowledge, then they're going to make assumptions. But I think whilst that was useful, like a lot of people would forget. Like I still was always different. Like I always had to sit at the front of the class, and like if you're allowed to like choose where you sit, no one's going to choose to sit at the front. So then no one sat next to me, and then I maybe interpreted that as like, oh, I don't have any friends, or like no one likes me because no one wants to sit with me, when actually it's probably just because who wants to be sitting at the front of the class? Or if friends were meeting up outside of school and like I wasn't allowed to like travel by myself or something, I couldn't go, and then I felt excluded, and I felt like people didn't want to hang out with me. But actually I think that was just a me problem. Like I think it's more about how you interpret things rather than what actually is happening.
I think that's a hindsight thing as well, isn't it? Like when you're in that, you can't see it, can you? You can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah, I mean I can't now anyway.
No.
Another thing actually was when trying to make new friends and meeting new people, you'll have it that like you kind of know someone but not very well, or you've like had a conversation with them and you did like them and you want to be friends, and then you see them somewhere around school, or you're supposed to see them but you can't see them. Like they'll wave and you don't wave back, and then they go and tell people like, oh, she's so rude, she didn't wave back or something, or like then they think that you don't want to be their friend, and it's actually just you didn't see them. So do you see what I mean? How like everything can just, it depends on how people interpret it. And you could interpret something like and make it snowball, or someone could interpret you not waving back as being rude because they've just forgotten that you wouldn't have seen them.
This is hugely a hindsight thing, and I don't think I did this at school, but now like the main thing I tell new people is, oh, if you see me out and about, I won't wave back at you.
Yeah.
And like it's a really good way of one, explaining like roughly the level of my sight, but also just like immediately nipping that in the bud of being like, I promise I'm not rude, but I am not going to wave at you in the street.
I always say like just literally yell at me, or like come to me,
grab me.
Yeah, exactly.
I think with my experiences, similar to what you were saying about waving to people in the corridors and stuff, was something I felt really bad about, especially when people would come up to me and be like, did you just ignore me for no reason? I'm really sorry I didn't see you. And I think that comes back to what we were saying earlier about like knowing the right time and place to tell people that you can't see, because things like that, if people are perceiving it, if they don't come up to you and question you on why you didn't say hello to them in the corridor, and you haven't explained to them that you can't see them, you don't know how many potential new friends are perceiving that the wrong way. So I think that's quite important to make it clear to people when you feel comfortable early on, so that people aren't thinking you're sending messages that you're not intending to send when you miss them in the corridor. And something that I found really difficult at secondary school with friends was kind of things that were popular and things that were cool, because those things changed a lot. And as with secondary school and teenagers, there are things that are uncool and things that people will try to tell you not to do, or maybe mock you a little bit or tease you a little bit about, and that can feel really horrible. And I think there's certain things when you're visually impaired that are non-negotiable. So coming back to sitting at the front in class, with my condition, I can't sit in the sun for very long. So at break time, it was difficult because my friends who were wanting to sit with me knew that I couldn't sit in the sun. But then it was tricky for the friends in the group who thought it was uncool to sit in the shade, or they wanted to sunbathe and get their tan growing. And balancing when you allow people to kind of like tell you what to do. And similarly with sitting at the front of class, if we're doing group work, making it very clear that you can't see if you don't sit at the front, you have to sit at the front. And if the rest of the group want to work with you, they need to do the same. And that's a bit uncomfortable. And sometimes there will be situations where the group decide they don't want to sit with you. But over time, I think the more you practice it and the more you stick to what you know is right for you in your eyes, people will realise that there's a difference between what's cool and trending and what is non-negotiable. And if they want to be your friend, which I'm sure there's lots of people who do, they will realise quite quickly, and they will start volunteering to sit at the front. In my experience, people were volunteering to sit in the shade with me, volunteering to sit at the front. Initially, I got laughed at for wearing a hat because you weren't allowed hats as part of the school uniform.
At school, using humour to maybe in a way to deflect, but also to get people involved and ask questions was quite a cool method to do it. And I think, Abby, you touched on stuff like being cool and, you know, what kids, but the one thing about kids, especially younger kids, it's not very hard to make them laugh. So if you laugh at yourself, you're doing it first almost. And it made me feel kind of more comfortable. And then it also made, I've been told, it actually made other people more comfortable. So, you know, if I made a joke about my condition, they then feel a lot more comfortable to come up to me and be like, hey, like, just actually how much can you see? And then I describe to them. And the more people ask, the more people actually understand kind of those little nuances. Like, for example, not seeing them in the street, or, you know, the how close you go to the paper, or having to sit at the front. I think that's another massive thing as well, is seating plans can really determine your school experience. I think people really do underestimate. So I think sometimes it can really feel like a bit, like I have to sit at the front all the time. But I think with that, like Abby says, the people who want to be your friend will make those accommodations for you and will come and sit at the front with you. If they don't want to, then they're not really worth your time anyways. Because I actually don't think, I think all of these points come from hindsight and from being, you know, in our 20s now, but I actually don't think sitting at the front is that big of a deal. I know it's not the coolest thing in the world. I think, to be honest, now people are like, when we go to the theatre or a concert, everyone wants to be at the front.
Just picking up on the this is just random, on the sitting at the front thing. I never quite understood it, because even when I sat at the front, I still couldn't ever see the board or what was going on.
Yeah.
So I
was just about to say that.
Why am I sitting at the front?
I told teachers that there's no point me sitting at the front because I still can't see the board. So wherever I sat, I was just going to take a picture of the board anyway, kind of thing. So I don't understand why they obviously.
I mean, there's no one in the way of your picture of the board, but I think it's more so the teacher can keep an eye on you to be like, but also like to pass you stuff, like check you've got what you need. But with sitting in the front, like my friends said it was great. They're like, actually, it's really helpful sitting in the front. You can ask the teacher questions. You can like do this. And when we stopped having lessons altogether, all my friends would like automatically go to the front out of habit, and then also were like, actually, it's great. We always sit at the front now.
Yeah. And I was quite a chatty gal at school, so sometimes I'd be sat at the front talking to the people around me, and the teachers were like, right, we're going to have to move you, and I'd be like, but you can't. So that actually got a few giggles from the class. But yeah, no, it is true. It actually didn't help that much, but it helped a little for me in my case.
Were any of you guys bullied? How did you deal with it at the time?
Badly. It was difficult, but like anyone, regardless if you are different or not, and that was in quotes, everyone's different anyway, but anyone would find it difficult to be bullied. I don't think that's like, oh, I found it difficult because I'm VI. And I can't even necessarily tell you whether I was like made fun of because I was VI or just because that's what happens at school sometimes. I think it's very, very difficult to like be able to untangle kind of like what's responsible for what. So I think maybe like just remembering that if people are unkind, they can be unkind to everyone. It's not necessarily because you're VI.
I think it's a really good point, but I think specifically there are definitely areas that people, like I think Emma would be able to relate. When you look different as well, that's something that you notice.
I was gonna mention that. I think for me that was huge at school. It actually drove me to dye my hair, and I still dye my eyebrows, and I love doing that. It's like a fashion statement. It's the bold hair and everything, and I'm really happy doing that. But that was out of actually trying to hide my condition and even it didn't work. Like my roots were awful, and people knew from a mile off, and people used to shout at me in the road and like albino from God knows out of nowhere. I got it on the bus once, and I think I'd like gone a bit long without dyeing my hair and eyebrows, and someone shouted at me like, "Oi, where's your eyebrows at? And what are your eyes doing? You freak!" And big long lines like that, and I was like, "Wow, how creative!" And everyone was looking at me, and like the people around me said, "Oh, are you okay?" But nothing really was said. And I think the way I cope with that, I cried and I was so upset about it. But I actually looked at the person who said that to me and thought, wow, like you must not really have a great life to have to take it out on other people like that. And I know that's such a cliche thing to say. And I tell you now, if someone told me that when I was younger, I'd be like, oh, like stop it. But it's so, so, so true. And they don't have a nice life, and I felt sorry for them, and I feel sorry for them now when it happens to me. Christine, I'm sure you can attest to this. It still happens now. I did get a lot of stick at school, and some of it was quite creative, so I'll give them that. The names they came up with, there was some interesting ones. From my side, it was actually more looking different rather than the fact that I couldn't see. My QTVI said this to me when I was very, very young. Everyone has something to be picked on. You could be tall, short, ginger. You could be albino, you could have visual impairment, you could be anything, and everyone's so different.
Being unique is actually like cool and makes you interesting, and kids don't realise that.
But I'd say on that, like, a lot of the time bullying just comes from people who don't have the best time themselves, and it makes them feel better about finding someone that they see as a victim kind of thing. So like in school I wasn't bullied, but I was definitely like pushed out of things. Like people wouldn't tell me where they were sat, or they would go out and not tell me kind of thing. And it turns out like they're just having a rubbish time themselves, and they needed someone as an emotional punching bag, and that ended up being like me. But I kind of realised like growing up the middle of three girls, like I got thick skin kind of thing. So like nothing anybody said really like fazed me. But then if someone else heard it, they'd be like, "Oh my God, have you just let them say that?" And it's like, they clearly got stuff going on. Like, if they need to take it out on someone, kind of go for it.
Nothing ever came from a place of people wanting to be mean to me or wanting to pick on me. It's just like ignorance when people don't understand. And I think, especially when I was a lot younger, like I didn't like being asked questions, and that was what got to me. Is people asking me too many questions, or people making comments about like me using large print or using an iPad in school. Or the thing that like used to really, really get to me, and it still is a bit of a pet peeve, is when people would say like, "Oh, I'm so blind. Like without my glasses, I'm so blind." It's so like it really frustrated me. Or trying to, and now like I don't really mind. I'm happy to kind of explain the difference to people, but they'd be like, "Oh yeah, no, like me too. No, I can't see without my glasses either."
I remember I was in a science lesson once, and one of these girls was just like, "Oh my God, I'm so blind. I can't see that." And I was like, "Oh, same." And she turned around and was like, "Oh my God." And I think I like ruined her day by accident, but I just kind of laughed it off because like it was funny.
It's not our job to educate people, and like especially when we're younger, but sometimes these things are just from a place of ignorance. And actually, if people are willing to just like listen to you explain it, then that will be the end of it. Like they will just apologize, like, "Oh, I didn't realize that that was something you didn't like, it wasn't appropriate to say that, or that you didn't want to be asked that, or you don't want that pointed out.
And sometimes it is worth taking the time to explain to them some of the things that I found difficult, like people teasing me for sitting at the front of class, needing to cover up when I was in the sun and stuff. I think at the time, a lot of other people my age didn't realise that I didn't like doing those things either, and I wanted to be the same as them, and I wanted to sit with them and do the things that they were doing and not have to wear different clothes to them and things like that. And I think sometimes it's important, even if they know you're visually impaired, which my friends did, sometimes they don't put that connection that you're not sitting at the front because you're the only child in the class who likes to sit at the front. You're sitting at the front because you understand that that's how you're going to be able to see the class. And the other children don't necessarily have that understanding that it has to happen for you. They think that you're choosing, which sometimes I think can create a bit of a difference between you and them, and that's when sometimes they might start thinking that's very strange that this person is completely different from us. So sometimes it's really important just to turn around and say to them, like, oh, I hate sitting at the front, if you do, and or I wish I could wear the same t-shirt that you're wearing, but I'm not allowed to, or I have to. And like, you know, it's okay to say to them that you don't like doing those things as well. And I think that allows them to kind of reconnect back with you and be like, wait a minute, oh, she's the same. I don't like sitting in the front and she doesn't either. But the difference is she has to and I don't have to. And that also helps with them. People start to volunteer to sit at the front with you if they know that you don't like doing it either and they're the same as you for that. They'll be a bit more willing, and it kind of takes away that difference that they might be picking on a bit more when they realise that you don't necessarily like it either.
One thing I would just add about what we're talking about in terms of like people just not really having the understanding is that it's okay that is hard and like that is upsetting, even if they haven't meant it in that way, and like it happens over time. And I think all of us would agree that like from year 7 to finishing secondary school, it's a huge like growth journey, and it is fine that you get frustrated when people ask you the same questions and that people don't understand and think that you're weird for wanting to sit at the front. Like it is really hard to have those things. And Kate, like you were saying, we have so much more going on. Like our brains are working like 3 times as hard or something with trying to learn the lesson and having everything else that's going on in the background. Like it is really challenging. And I think it's like it's okay to sort of give ourselves a break and be like, yeah, no, it's like I did get upset when that person asked me for the 5th time today why I was reading like a bigger version of the textbook or something. Like it's challenging.
Sometimes you have to look at yourself and be like, I'm actually allowed to have a bit of a bad day. And I think that's a really massive thing going through school, is I grew that thicker skin and I grew that positivity out of negativity. But sometimes you can be a bit negative, because if you don't let yourself be negative, it actually like becomes very overwhelming. And admitting, like all of you guys have said, like Abby and Beth, you've said to just say, actually, you know what, for the 5th time, I can't see the board. Thank you. Just figure it out yourself.
I think you're right, Emma. You do yourself a disservice if you walk around going, "Oh, it's all great," and it's not, and everything's fine, because that's not the reality. And it is really okay to be like that and think that too. Did any of you have TAs? How did it go? And like, how did you deal with it? Because I remember people didn't want to sit next to me because I had the adult with me, and it was like when you had to pick partners, but I had to, in science, like I had to do mine with my TA and everyone else had their partners, and it just always made me feel so rubbish and so different, and I never knew how to deal with that. Did anyone else?
Yeah, I had a TA. I actually had a male TA, which is kind of unspoken, like unheard of when you're a female. You usually just get put with a female TA. But he was a bit of a legend, to be honest. He was really open to hearing what I wanted and stuff. And it got to a point where I was like, can you just be in the classroom? We'll have a signal. If I need you, come and help me. But can you not sit right by me, kind of thing? And that really helped me socially. But he kind of knew like when I needed help and when I didn't, and he would check in every so often. But he would also just help other people in the classroom if they needed it. Like he was my PA, like his job was to work with me, but he kind of knew that I needed a bit of space to be able to socialise and be a teenager and chat when you're probably not supposed to, kind of thing. I think it's just having those open conversations with TAs.
I actually had an issue, and this could be kind of a bit of a taboo topic, but I think it's something that could be spoken about. Is I was put into a form class with people with lots of like a variation of learning difficulties, and I found that I was clumped together with these people with different learning difficulties and varying different levels of understanding of not just the lesson but of like friendship, social cues, etc, etc. And I found that quite socially isolating, not because of the fact that, you know, I was sat with them, they all became my friends too, but I think as a whole, as a group, we found that quite segregating, all being put with one person at the front of the class, all being sat on the same table, when none of us actually had any of the same needs. And with that comes that whole stigma around, oh, I don't want to sit on that table. And that was a massive issue actually in my first few years at school. And it's something I actually spoke to the school about, and just said, could you integrate me? And I think all of us, we would like to be integrated within like non-SEND students.
PE. So what was it like for you guys?
I mean, I think I can make a statement that I reckon everyone will agree with, which is they just give you the orange ball for any sport ever. It's like, oh, we've got an orange netball, so you'll be able to play netball now. I actually was pretty good at netball because I was a really good goal shooter. But that's just because I'm tall. But I think I became notorious within like SEND staff for not liking PE. I remember I used to go to like a learning support group, which was it was like 6 dyslexic girls and me. And it like I don't think any of us were getting much out of it in terms of SEND support, but we were all friends, so it was good. But they once had us like write down what we struggle with, and I wrote like PE, and that was just like forever. I was like, you don't like PE, to the point where like when we got into year 10, we had to elect, like one of our PE lessons was you picked a sport each term, and I basically just said I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do. The worst part for me was playing sport with people I didn't know. Like within my form, it was fine. They all knew I was VI. No one was going to throw a ball at me without warning me first. But like going into a mixed group of people who didn't know me and like trying to play dodgeball was like my worst nightmare. So I just didn't do it, and I just I had like my own private study session instead. But I regret that now because, and Kate, I'm really interested what you have to say, because I play sport now, but I play VI sport now, and it's obviously a very different experience. And that was never offered to me at school. I was the only VI person in the school.
Yeah. PE at school was an absolute pet peeve of mine. I've been doing sport at an elite level for years. Like even through high school, I was competing with judo, like at national, international levels. But because I was VI, they always put me in the bottom set of PE, and I was like, this is ridiculous. I played bench ball every week because that's all they could do. Or I remember one PE session, they were like, oh, we're doing badminton today. I was like, good luck. So I kind of like was just like, oh, I can't do that. So I played cricket instead. But the thing that I've found really frustrating with PE is like QTVIs. It's the first thing they think, oh, instead of PE, let's do some Braille. And I was like, absolutely not. Sport is the one thing that I want to do. But because I wasn't in a higher set for PE in like 7, 8 and 9, I couldn't do it as like a GCSE, and I didn't do it as an A level. But I went on to do a sport degree.
I was just kind of bad at sport, to be fair. I cannot relate to Kate. I do not play at any elite level at all. So fair play to you. But no, one thing I always remember, which I always tell people because I think it's quite funny, I had to be removed from hockey because I'm pretty sure I couldn't see the ball. Well, I knew I couldn't see the ball, and I kept on hitting people in the shins because my depth perception's awful, thinking the ball was their shins. Anyways, that was two times a week I was doing gymnastics. Weren't much better at that because you had to jump over things, so there was lots of bruises. And then, you know, I thought, oh, let me think, what sport can I do? Running. Perfect. Okay, you don't really need to see. Had a guide runner for running, and actually got quite good at that, but ended up competing in like the cross country trials for fully sighted people, but with my guide runner. I ended up getting into like the next stage of it. It was nothing crazy, but the next stage of it, and some of the girls didn't. And that's where they were like, oh, it's because she has a guide runner. It's because, like, and I remember that vividly. And then I just stopped running because I was like, well, if I can't do it with a guide runner without getting kind of slack for not being as good as other people, then why would I do it? Now, kind of similar to Beth, like I kind of regret that. And I now am quite a big runner myself. I love it.
I I also was put in bottom set PE, but for me it was kind of my decision because our main sport in school was lacrosse, and the balls in lacrosse are incredibly hard and heavy, and they move fast and they move like above head height. And usually I don't ever say that I don't want to do something because of my eyes, but in this situation there was a lot of complicated, stressful things going on at that time in school that I was struggling with, support for different subjects as well. And the thought of doing PE where there were heavy balls flying at head height and I couldn't tell where they were coming from and I couldn't really dodge out the way and like work out how to play properly, it was just going to be that little bit too much extra stress that I was like, you know what, I don't need to put myself through this. I spoke to the school and asked if I could not be involved in sports that were painful if you got hit in the face with the balls.
In school, I always wondered like why I didn't get like picked for sports teams and stuff, but then I kind of realised like it's frowned upon when you like catch a basketball with your face instead.
If you could give advice to a kid now who's in year 6 or year 7 who's struggling because they're visually impaired in mainstream education, what top bit of advice would you give, being in the position that you're in now and being able to look back with an adult head on your shoulders? Emma.
It's actually going to be okay. Sometimes it feels like the absolute end of the world when people make fun of you for not being able to see something, or people make fun of you for the way you look, or if your eyes are shaking, or in my case my hair was bright white and and I had some dodgy eyebrows and so, oh god, there was too much. But yeah, I think just embracing your difference and viewing it as something that's really, really cool, because you're so awesome, you're so cool, whether you've got a guide dog, a cane, or whether you don't need all of those things but you have to lean closer to a thing and you've got a cool iPad or some techie like camera. It's all really, really cool, and please view yourself as cool because you are.
Abby.
In a similar way, I think my top bit of advice would be to keep doing you. You know why you have to do the things you do, and you know that there's some things that you don't particularly enjoy that are different that other students don't have to do, but sometimes the other students haven't quite caught up yet. There's things that we learn that other students will learn later on in life, and that can be really frustrating. So just remember that you're doing everything right. You don't need to change what you're doing, and just because you stand out in certain ways doesn't mean that that's a problem with you, or that you need to worry that you're different or you're weird or that you should start changing what you're doing. It just means that everybody else around hasn't quite learned and understood that yet.
Beth?
Mine would be that don't take no for an answer, and if you need something to access it, then that's what you need and that's what you need to get. I think I was very bad because I can just about read small print if it's like up against my eyes, just getting on with it and reading it, and it's not good for you and it's tiring, and it just reinforces the narrative that people don't need to do everything for you. The more you accept not getting things done properly, the more they're not going to get done properly.
Kate?
I would say like high school isn't forever. It feels like it is, but it really isn't. It's not the end of the world. People who truly matter don't see you as a VI person, they just see you for you, and you just need to remember like what even is normal these days. Like just be authentically yourself and remember that you belong in any room that you walk into.